You can love someone deeply and still be running on empty. I
Mm.
mean, we really need to unpack this today. Because usually when we talk about love, especially taking care of a family member, we use this language of infinite capacity.
Right, like it's this endless magical well.
Exactly. We treat love like it just, keeps replenishing itself. But the reality for millions of people is that you can absolutely adore someone and your tank can still hit absolute zero.
It's a profound contradiction, and honestly, it's um, it's one of the most painful realizations a person can grapple with.
Yeah.
Because we're so conditioned by society to believe that if you just love someone enough, well, the exhaustion won't matter.
Like the love is just supposed to conquer the fatigue.
Right. But biology and psychology, too, they just do not work that way.
Hmm.
The human capacity to give has hard physiological limits, even when the love doesn't.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm here with our resident expert. And today we are exploring the silent and often totally misunderstood weight of caregiver burnout.
And compassion fatigue, too.
Yes, exactly. To get to the bottom of this, we're looking at clinical materials from Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC.
They're a telehealth therapy practice based out of Georgia, right?
Yeah, and they specialize in treating exactly this kind of immense chronic stress. So our mission for you today is to validate what you might be experiencing in the dark.
Which is so important.
Right. We want to pull the mechanics of this exhaustion into the light and outline the actual clinical paths to healing.
And right at the top, we really need to set the tone here. If you are currently caring for someone, maybe a parent, a partner, or a child with high needs, we know your plate is overflowing.
Oh, totally.
What we are analyzing today is not about adding another to-do to your list. It is
Right.
not some lecture on self-care telling you to go take a bubble bath and try harder.
Please, no. I think caregivers hear that enough.
Exactly. It's about offering a framework to understand your own emotional and neurological landscape, so you don't have to carry this crushing weight of guilt on top of the physical exhaustion.
Because to understand how to lighten this load, I mean, we have to look at how it gets so heavy in the first place.
Right.
What stands out in the CHC data is that caregiver burnout doesn't just suddenly announce itself. You don't wake up on a Tuesday and realize you're burnt out.
No, it builds imperceptibly.
It's the steady accumulation,
Yeah.
Managing the insurance calls, the medication schedules, and, oh, this phrase really stopped me. It's the nights you sleep with one ear open.
Yeah, let's actually look at the physical reality of what sleeping with one ear open means for the human body.
Yeah.
Because that isn't just a metaphor.
No, it's a real biological thing.
Oh, absolutely. It is a state of neurological hypervigilance. When you're listening for a cough or a monitor beeping from the next room, your brain's threat detection center never powers down.
The amygdala.
Right, the amygdala. It stays
That's
engaged. It's basically acting as a sentry all night.
So even if your eyes are closed and you're technically asleep, your brain is still working a night shift.
Precisely. And because the amygdala stays engaged, it prevents your brain from entering those deep, restorative REM cycles.
Wow.
You might be in bed for 8 hours, but structurally, your brain is getting 0 hours of actual rest.
That is wild.
And over months and years, that chronic sleep deprivation fundamentally alters your cognitive function.
I was actually trying to think of how to visualize this cognitive load. And let's go with the smartphone analogy, but take it a step further.
Okay, I like that.
Caregiver burnout is like a phone that has 20 heavy applications running in the background. You've got the GPS running, Bluetooth is searching, brightness is all the way up.
And the battery is just draining rapidly from
Yeah.
the baseline operations.
Exactly. But it's not just the battery. Your phone's RAM, its working memory, is completely maxed out.
Right. Because if 80% of your brain's processing power is dedicated to anticipating a medical crisis,
You literally do not have the bandwidth left to process a normal conversation, let alone regulate your own emotions.
that is a highly accurate representation of the mechanism at play. When your cognitive RAM is maxed out, you experience an exhaustion that sleep just simply cannot fix.
Because the apps are still open.
Exactly. You can't just take a weekend nap and cure caregiver burnout. Those background apps, the hypervigilance, the anticipatory anxiety, they're still running.
Which perfectly illustrates the distinction CHC draws between burnout and its close cousin, compassion fatigue.
Because they aren't the same thing, even though people, they use the terms interchangeably all the time.
Right. Burnout is the physical and logistical battery draining. It's the sheer exhaustion of the tasks and the lack of sleep.
But compassion fatigue is the emotional well running dry.
It's the emotional cost of absorbing someone else's pain over an extended period,
Yeah.
right? You're acting as this like emotional sponge for their suffering day in and day out.
And because that sponge can only hold so much, the result is this profound emotional depletion.
So how do therapists identify when a caregiver has crossed that invisible line? Like from normal tiredness to clinical burnout.
Well, there are specific physiological and psychological red flags. One of the first indicators is how the physical body breaks down.
Okay, what does that look like?
We often think of burnout as being purely, in our heads. But the clinical data shows it shows up as chronic headaches, sudden changes in appetite, or getting sick way more frequently.
Let's connect those dots. Why does emotional and logistical stress make you catch a cold more often? Like, what is the biological mechanism there?
It comes down to cortisol,
Yeah.
our primary stress hormone.
Right, the fight or flight stuff.
Exactly. When you are in that constant state of hypervigilance, your body is continuously pumping out cortisol. In short bursts, it's great. It helps you run from a bear.
But there is no bear, just a medical schedule.
Right. And chronic elevated cortisol aggressively suppresses the immune system. It actually reduces the production of white blood cells.
Oh, wow. So your body literally loses its ability to fight off everyday viruses.
Yes, because all its resources are dedicated to maintaining this artificial state of high alert. The body keeps the score, and it physically deteriorates.
That is terrifying, but I mean, it explains so much. Your immune system is effectively being hijacked by the stress.
It really is.
But there's another major red flag the sources point out, and it's psychological. It's this creeping numbness toward the person you're caring for.
Which then transitions into dread. Dreading the tasks you used to do willingly.
Yeah. And then they list this one symptom, resentment that feels shameful to admit.
Yes, the resentment. I have to stop right here because I really want to push back on the standard advice we hear about this.
Go for it.
When therapists say things like, you need to set boundaries so you don't feel resentful, I imagine a listener thinking, wait, if I set a boundary with my sick dad, he might miss his medication.
Right. Or he might fall.
Exactly. That's not a boundary, that is neglect. How can a therapist possibly tell a caregiver to just stop caring, just to avoid feeling resentful?
And that right there is the ultimate trap of caregiver guilt. That's a brilliant point. The fear is that any boundary equals abandonment.
Which is terrifying. But from a clinical perspective, setting a boundary is not about stopping caring. It is an acknowledgement of structural reality.
What do you mean by structural reality?
Well, the resentment you feel is not a moral failing. It doesn't mean you lack empathy or that you're a bad person. The resentment is simply your brain's alarm system screaming that the current structure is unsustainable.
Ah. So the resentment isn't about not loving them, it's a distress signal.
Exactly. To borrow a phrase from the CHC framework, it means you're carrying a load meant for more than one set of hands.
Oh, that's powerful.
You are attempting to do the job of a whole village, a team of nurses, case managers, emotional supports, entirely by yourself.
And your brain just generates resentment to force you to pull back.
Yes, because if you don't, your physical and mental systems will entirely collapse. And, if you collapse, who is caring for your loved one then?
Carrying a load meant for more than one set of hands. That shift in perspective is massive. It moves the blame from a personal failure to a structural failure.
Which is incredibly validating for caregivers to hear.
It naturally brings us to the question of who exactly is being crushed under this structural failure. And this isn't isolated to one specific demographic, is it?
Not at all. It spanned the entire human experience. The materials show it affects spouses of people with chronic illnesses, parents of kids with severe disabilities.
And adult children caring for their aging parents, right?
But there is one demographic that clinicians see facing a uniquely intense burden. The sandwich generation.
Right, the sandwich generation. These are the folks who are managing caregiving in both directions simultaneously.
Exactly. They're raising their own children who still need intensive developmental support while simultaneously managing the medical appointments and declining health of their aging parents.
I can't even imagine the friction of switching gears like that.
It's exhausting just to think about.
You're going from, like, a pediatrician appointment for a toddler's ear infection straight to a geriatric neurologist appointment to discuss a parent's dementia in the same afternoon.
The psychological whiplash is profound. You are the emotional and logistical anchor for the generation above you and the generation below you.
That is so much pressure.
And uniquely, you're managing conflicting developmental trajectories. You're trying to foster independence in your kids while watching the painful loss of autonomy in your parents.
That dual directional pressure is just a perfect storm for total systemic collapse.
It really is.
So, if a caregiver realizes they are in this state of systemic collapse, their cortisol is high, their RAM is maxed out, they're feeling that numbness and resentment, how do they actually set this load down?
Right.
Like, if boundaries feel like neglect, how does a professional actually untangle this knot without the caregiver just breaking down completely?
This is where we transition from understanding the damage to actual clinical intervention. The primary path forward is engaging in targeted therapy.
But how does talking about it fix the schedule?
Well, therapists frame it in a very utilitarian way. Therapy isn't just about venting for an hour. It is a designated, safe container where you don't have to be the strong one.
Okay, that makes sense.
It allows a professional to look at the sprawling mess of your responsibilities and help you identify what can actually be delegated, what can be modified, and what is truly essential.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
If I am that exhausted, if I am truly numb and running on empty, I honestly wouldn't care what label a professional slaps on it. Call it burnout, call it depression, call it whatever. I just want to sleep.
I hear that a lot, actually.
Right. Why do we need to split hairs clinically? Why does the specific diagnosis matter if the symptom is just total exhaustion?
It is a totally fair question. They look incredibly similar from the outside, and they frequently co-occur. But the distinction is critical because the mechanics of the treatment are completely different.
Okay, break that down for me.
If you are dealing purely with caregiver burnout, the interventions lean heavily toward logistical changes. Respite planning, adjusting the physical environment, and cognitive behavioral strategies for boundary setting.
So you're basically treating the schedule and the cognitive load.
Right. But if you have crossed over into clinical depression, we are no longer just talking about logistics. We are talking about a fundamental shift in the neurochemistry of the brain.
Oh, I see.
The brain has stopped producing or absorbing serotonin and dopamine correctly. You cannot just respite plan your way out of clinical depression.
Right. A schedule change doesn't fix neurochemistry.
Exactly. It requires specific therapeutic modalities and potentially medication to repair that neurochemical baseline. If you treat depression like it's just burnout, the patient will not get better.
And then they'll probably feel like they're failing at therapy, too.
Which just adds to the guilt. So you have to have the right map for the territory you're actually in.
That makes total sense now. And looking at the specific tools therapists use, there's one intervention mentioned in the CHC materials that I found absolutely fascinating.
The grief processing.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've talked about boundary work, but they highlight the necessity of grief processing for the version of the relationship that changed.
It is arguably the most profound concept in caregiver therapy. We have to learn how to mourn the living.
Mourning the living. Because normally, when we hear the word grief, we immediately associate it with death, right? Like a funeral.
Right, you grieve their absence.
But this is grieving someone who is sitting right next to you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you become a full-time caregiver for a spouse with a severe chronic illness, you've lost the version of the relationship where you were equal peers.
Yeah.
You've lost the partner who used to be your sounding board, the person you shared specific activities with. The dynamic has forcibly transitioned from romantic partners to patient and medical manager.
So you're grieving the future you thought you were going to have with them, even while they're still in the room.
Or if you're caring for an aging parent with cognitive decline, you are grieving the loss of the parent who used to comfort you.
The roles are entirely reversed. The protector has become the protected.
And if you do not actively process the grief for the relationship dynamic that was lost, it doesn't just go away. It festers.
It turns into that resentment we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, which accelerates the compassion fatigue. A therapist provides the framework to safely mourn that loss, validating that it is a real loss without making you feel like you are betraying the person you're keeping alive.
That is so incredibly heavy, but also weirdly liberating to realize it has a name, mourning the living.
It gives people permission to feel their feelings.
But here is the massive logistical elephant in the room that we have to address.
Okay, let's hear it.
We are telling exhausted, burnt out people whose cognitive RAM is at 100% and who literally cannot leave their house because their loved one might fall that they need to go to therapy.
It's the ultimate catch-22 of caregiving.
Right. For a caregiver, the idea of researching a therapist, driving across town, sitting in a waiting room for an hour and driving back, It's an impossible hurdle. It is a cruel irony that the people who need therapy the most are structurally barred from accessing it.
You desperately need the lifeline, but you don't have the energy or the logistical freedom to reach for it. But what is fascinating about reviewing coping and healing counseling's specific practice model is seeing how the clinical industry is actively adapting to solve this exact structural problem.
Yeah, they aren't just saying, come to our office. Their model is entirely structured to remove the friction.
Which is so crucial.
First and foremost, CHC is a 100% telehealth practice. They operate via secure, HIPAA-compliant video.
So the commute is instantly eliminated.
Gone. You don't have to hire a respite nurse just so you can leave the house for 2 hours. You can do the session from your living room couch while your parent is napping in the next room.
Or even sitting in your parked car in the driveway if that's the only quiet space you can find. I have clients do that all the time.
It fundamentally changes the accessibility equation. And this applies geographically, too, because they serve clients across all 159 counties in Georgia.
Right, so a caregiver in a highly rural area who might be a 2-hour drive from the nearest specialized clinician now has the exact same access as someone in downtown Atlanta.
And it's not just a handful of generalists, either. The practice data shows they utilize a diverse team of over 15 licensed therapists. And we should probably clarify what those acronyms actually mean for a patient.
Good idea.
They have LCSWs, which are licensed clinical social workers, LPCs, licensed professional counselors, and LMFTs, licensed marriage and family therapists. Why does having that specific variety matter to a caregiver?
It matters because caregiving stress manifests as different domains of life.
How so?
Well, if the primary issue is the logistical collapse of the family unit, an LMFT is specifically trained to analyze and restructure family dynamics and communication.
Got it.
But if the issue is deep-seated individual trauma or navigating complex medical systems, an LCSW has specific clinical training for that intersection.
That makes total sense. And they have a diverse, culturally competent team, too.
Which is huge. It means a caregiver doesn't have to waste their precious cognitive RAM explaining their cultural background or family expectations to a therapist who simply doesn't get it.
You bypass that awkward translation phase and get straight to the healing.
Exactly. You can immediately connect with someone who understands your specific lens on the world.
And they cover everything from individual burnout and depression to couples counseling and teen therapy, so that sandwich generation caregiver can get help for themselves and connect their struggling teenager with a specialist in the exact same practice.
Which takes another logistical burden off their plate.
But we also have to talk about the financial barrier, because caregiving is notoriously expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Medical bills drain accounts just as fast as they drain energy.
Which is another structural hurdle the industry is trying to solve. In this case study of CHC, their insurance accessibility is really notable. They specifically accept Medicaid.
Which, for those covered, translates to a $0 copay.
A $0 copay. I mean, that completely removes the financial guilt of seeking help.
It really does. And for commercial plans, they process major carriers like Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana.
And the out-of-pocket cost for a session with those typically runs between $10 and $40.
They're demonstrating that high-level clinical support does not have to be a luxury good.
It's treating therapy as essential infrastructure, not a boutique service. And as a quick resource note for anyone in Georgia listening who needs to utilize this specific infrastructure, you can find them at chsctherapy.com. They also do phone intakes at 404-832-0102.
Or you can just email them at support@chctherapy.com.
Exactly. But stepping back to look at the whole picture as we wrap up this deep dive, the through line of everything we've explored today is that caregiving was never meant to be a solo endeavor.
It is biologically and psychologically impossible to sustain in isolation.
If your smartphone battery is dying because there are too many apps running, you don't blame the phone for being morally weak.
Right.
You plug it in and you close some apps. If you are feeling numb or physically sick or deeply resentful toward the person you love, you have not failed.
The structure around you has failed.
And it is entirely necessary to seek out a licensed professional who can help you rewire that structure. Someone to help you process the very real grief of a changing relationship and address the neurochemistry of your exhaustion.
Recognizing that you cannot do it alone is the very first step out of the dark.
So true.
Which actually brings me to a final thought for you to consider as we close today.
Okay, let's hear it.
Caregivers are conditioned to view taking time for themselves, whether that's an hour for therapy or setting a firm boundary is taking something away from the person they love. It feels selfish.
Right, the guilt creeps back in.
But if chronic burnout physically destroys your immune system, drains your cognitive RAM, and replaces your empathy with numbness, could the act of setting a boundary and seeking clinical help actually be the most profound, selfless act of love you can possibly offer them?
Wow. If you refuse to let your own well run dry, you are ensuring they never go thirsty. That completely dismantles the guilt.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep breath, grant yourself a little grace today, and remember, you do not have to carry the entire world on your shoulders alone. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you next time.